Well, hello and welcome back to the Alliance Against Seclusion Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion Restraint. I also get to, pull double duty here. I'm also the host for the podcast here, which is always a lot of fun to do, and I hope you enjoy it as well. But a little bit about us, if you are just joining us for the first time, I know we have a lot of people that seem to join us kind of week after week, and it's great to see familiar faces, familiar names, and know that you're here joining us. But if you're not familiar, maybe this is your first time, welcome. And a little bit about us. The Alliance Against Seclusion Restraint was formed in 2019. We started out really around the issue of restraint and seclusion happening in schools around the nation, but our work began to grow, and it wasn't just restraint and seclusion. It was suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment. It was even more broadly kind of all the things that were often done to other humans in the name of behavior. We are on a mission. We're on a mission trying to affect change, trying to move away from punitive and exclusionary discipline, outdated behavior management approaches, and hopefully have an impact on ending the school to prison pipeline. And we do a lot of work in the education sphere. You probably have seen our podcast before or events that we've done. This is really work dedicated to supporting change. And we welcome you and appreciate you joining us here today. Wherever you might be joining us from, we tend to get people that join us from all over the world, and it's a lot of fun to see who you are and where you're from. So if you're tuning in now, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from, and just say hello, and if you want to share anything else. Quick announcement before I get to our guests, and I'm really excited about our guest here today. We've got Jase Williams with me today from New Zealand, and we often talk about how we have people that join us from all over the world, and gosh, I guess our last two guests, we had a guest from Australia last time and New Zealand this time. This work is really work that does span the globe, and there's so many amazing people out there doing some incredible work. You're going to have an opportunity to meet one of those individuals today, and we'll learn a little bit more about Jase here in just a couple of minutes. Before we get to the live interview, just a little bit of an announcement. I like to share things when we have an opportunity to get together here. I do want to encourage you, if you are part of our community here. If you're not familiar with our website already, visit our website. It has a lot of great resources. We have articles, we have information that can help you in situations you might be going through. And we put out content on a really regular basis. And you can learn here about things like our research collaboration, where we're doing a study right now about the psychological impacts of restraint and seclusion. You can read our latest articles here as well. We had a really an article that got a lot of traction this week, written by one of our volunteers, Becca Engel. Why ABA can never be trauma informed, not now, not ever. So a lot of great content here. You can also support our work, and one of the things that we do is we encourage people that believe in what we're doing to consider supporting our work, because we are a very small nonprofit, and as such, we really rely on support from donations and other things to help us do the work we're doing to bring you the podcast, the educational programs. One way that you can support our work is to actually become a member. And if you go to our website, underneath Take Action, there's an option to join the Alliance. And when you click on that, it tells you, oops, I think I clicked on the wrong thing here. Let's try this again. When you click on Join the Alliance, it tells you about what we have as a membership program, where you can join the Alliance and from anywhere from $5 a month, make a monthly contribution, support our work, and there's some benefits along with it as well when you become a member, discounts on some of our educational programs and whatnot. But again, even just $5 a month, it makes a difference, and you get enough people that are supporting it, and it's really, really helpful. So again, just want to encourage you to consider supporting our work. Visit our website, check out a lot of the great resources that we have there, and thank you for again being part of the community. So again, before I bring up our guest here, which is really why we're here, this is the exciting part, just want to remind you, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're joining us from. I actually see one person here has already said hello, and hello there, Cassie from NSAR, Michigan and New Jersey, an affiliate group that is doing a lot of work in Michigan and New Jersey around reducing and eliminating restraint and seclusion. Always great to have you here. Others, let us know who you are and where you're joining us from in the chat. And let's go ahead and bring up our guest, why we are really here today, from all the way around the other side of the world. We've got Jase Williams with us. And a little bit about him. He is a TEDx speaker who has 25 years of experience working as an educator, is a former principal of the Henry Hill School, who won the prestigious Prime Minister's Education Excellence Award, Wellbeing. the top education award in New Zealand. Also a certified trainer in the Neurosequential Model in Education, the NME. Big fan of Dr. Perry's work here, and know that there's been a lot of work there in New Zealand as well. He's one of the leading voices in relational neuroscience and trauma-informed practice in education, and has shared his knowledge through an equity-focused, compassionate, and indigenous lens with thousands of educators. Of course, I know you also happen to host an amazing podcast, and I was lucky enough to be your guest on that at one point, which was a real honor. And you've done a lot of work in this space, and it's always an honor to connect with you and learn about the work that you're doing. And I'm really excited. I was excited to join you on your podcast, but I'm excited to have you now back on our podcast to share a bit about your journey and your experience with our community here. So I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Guy. It's been a minute since we last connected, and it was interesting. I know when I got the email about coming on your podcast, it was like a year in advance. That's just how busy you are in this space. So I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I remember, at the time that I was on your podcast, like, oh yeah, you got to be on mine. We're going to do this. And at that point we were booking out just about a year in advance, and we're back to the same. What happens is, you kind of come in contact with amazing people doing incredible work, and you're like, I want to have you on the podcast. And then I reach out to Courtney, and Courtney's like, you realize like 2026 is already almost full. You have one date left. So it's not going to be long. We're going to be booking 2027 here. But I always like to get people on the calendar, even if it takes a while for us to circle back and have the conversation. So it is absolutely a pleasure to have you here. And of course, you are joining us. Where in New Zealand are you?
I'm in Napier, so I'm in the North Island on the East Coast.
Gotcha. And what time is it where you are locally there?
It's 8:40 a.m. on Friday.
On Friday. So, I always have to remind viewers of that you are not only, hours ahead of us, you are a day ahead of us as well. And it's early in the morning there. We actually have some fairly regular viewers in Australia and New Zealand that often join us live. And when I see them, I know it's often very early in the morning. So always appreciate them making the time to join us wherever they might be. So again, in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from, where you're joining us from. But really a pleasure to have you here. And I want to talk a little bit about who you are, what your journey's been. We're just going to have a conversation. And I want to start. I mean, you've been in education, working in the field for over 25 years, doing a lot of, I think, really important work around kind of the neuroscience piece of this, the background in the neurosequential model, relational neuroscience, the trauma space. These are areas that I know when you and I talked before, we've got a lot of similar thoughts and ideas behind. But I want to go back in time a little bit, and just know a little bit about you prior to kind of getting into education and what led you there. So I'd love if you would share a little bit about your background and maybe what kind of led you in this direction of going into education, and let's trace your journey through that, because I think all of us tend to have somewhere along the line this journey, and it's not that one day we woke up and had all of these ideas and feelings that we have today. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, if you'd be willing to share a bit about kind of your background and what brought you to education.
So first and foremost, I'm a husband, a father, 3 children, 2 adult children, 28 and 27, a 17-year-old who thinks sometimes she's 27 and 28. I have 3 grandchildren who are aged 1, 7, and 8.
Oh, that's exciting.
And I've been an educator for the last 25 years. So I guess if we went back a little bit, I enjoyed school. So our primary school, your elementary school, I really enjoyed it. Learning was fun. I got to learn so many cool things, and I really connected with it. I went to what we call intermediate over here, so grades 7 and 8, and things started changing. I went from a school where everyone knew each other, we were connected, we'd built a culture of relational trust. People felt seen, heard, known, and valued and loved. And then you go to a much bigger school where you're pulling children from lots of different areas. We put them together in the same space for 2 years, and we turn over half the children every year because they go on to high school. And I didn't feel like I was seen or known or valued or loved in that space. My memory from that time is, and it's interesting, right? We have this negativity bias. So I can't think of many positive things, but there is a negative memory that sticks out for me. And we were doing an assignment or a research project. And I'm talking about the 1980s here. So
Hey,
there was no
I grew up in the 80s too, so you know.
yeah, there's no
I'm with you.
Google.
Yeah.
We're on a bicycle going down to the local library to research information in encyclopedias, and we're putting 20 cents, 50 cents into a photocopier to print out photos. It's that kind of era. So I spent all this time on this research project. I think it was about Egypt, and I gave it to my teacher, and he ended up calling my mother in. So she had to come for a meeting after school, and I had to sit in this meeting. I had no idea what the meeting was about, but he talked to her about how he felt I didn't give my best effort. I honestly feel like I gave my best effort. So the consequence of him deciding I wasn't giving my best effort was he gave me another assignment over and above the one I just handed in. Didn't happen to anyone else in the class, just me. And I guess from there, I got this message that I didn't belong, that I was always going to have to try twice as hard to be seen. And I qualify that by saying I was the only person that looked like me in my class, as someone who was indigenous to New Zealand. I'm Māori. So I didn't have the words to explain it then. I just knew how it felt to be to feel different in the class. So went to high school 2 years later, and similar things kept coming up for me. So I didn't finish high school. I dropped out of high school halfway through my last year of high school. I actually remember the day. It was my birthday, because on my birthday when I turned 18, I could receive, I guess, government assistance.
Mm.
So I thought, cool, I'm going to get paid now. I'll throw school away, get paid some money. I thought I was rich. I want to say I was paid something like $117 a week. That was the most money I'd ever seen in my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was amazing. So left school. It was the final day of the basketball season. So I got to play my final game. Turned 18, signed out. I was free from school. 2 years later, I was on a sport and recreation course that involved us going in as 17 to 20-year-olds into schools, into elementary schools, and teaching physical education, doing classes in different sports with children. And I realized then and there that this felt really good. The kids were really connecting with me, and I got something out of it, and they seemed to really like me as well. So it was quite reciprocal.
Hmm.
So I made a decision then that maybe I want to go and be a teacher.
Hmm.
So I spent a year in what we call alternative education in New Zealand. So these are students that are excluded from school between the ages of 12 or 13 to about 18. And I worked with youth. And that was really the making of me in lots of ways. I learned everything I needed to know about how to connect with people in those spaces, with students that had been kicked out of the education system. Then I did a year as what we call a teacher's aide, and did realizing I really enjoy being with children. So went to university and got a degree, which I'm still the only person in my family that's been to university. I went and taught at an elementary school here, and I guess my journey over time was I was great at connecting with children, academic learning outcomes. The kids did really well with me, but I had these innovative ideas, and as a classroom teacher, I couldn't really do much more with them beyond my classroom. So I guess over a short period of time, I moved through the rankings to a team leader, assistant principal, deputy principal, and then actually became a principal. So it's quite ironic, I didn't finish high school and ended up leading a school. So I was quite a young principal at the time, 34 years of age, when I first took up my principalship. And I think that was a good thing, because I was inexperienced, didn't really know what to do. So I really tried some things, I guess, that more experienced principals probably wouldn't have tried. So it kind of gave me license. I took over a school where our attendance was very low, academic achievement was low, perception was low. So I really couldn't do anything worse, to be honest. So it gave me license to try some things. And over a 7-year period, we did try some things. So that's a little bit about my background. Don't know if I've frozen or if you're frozen, Guy. Are we back?
So yeah, we froze. We're back. And I guess when we're going halfway around the world, these things sometimes happen. Actually, we've had a couple of little internet hiccups here, so we hope that won't happen again.
Okay.
You had some of these innovative ideas, and of course, you kind of talk about how you went up through the ranks and became a principal early on, and then was this kind of your launching point to start exploring some of these ideas? In terms of some of the things that you were beginning to think at that point?
Not really yet. So what happened was we were doing some very innovative things with digital technology. We were an Apple distinguished school, and there weren't too many of those in New Zealand. So we were doing some real innovative things with devices. So that led me over to the US, and I did a visit to San Francisco and San Diego, looking primarily at digital tech and innovation, but also at project-based learning. That was something I was becoming really interested in. But what I actually saw was in those spaces, children who came from homes where the adults were heavily involved in technology, digital tech, and the adults didn't want their children to be as immersed as they were in technology. They kind of got it before the rest of us. They were developing all these tools, but they didn't want their kids to be part of it. I think we understand the repercussions of that later. But
right.
So what I saw this thing called social and emotional learning, and I'd never heard of it. And I remember going into an elementary school class. These children were maybe 6 years of age, and they would walk into the classroom at the beginning of a day, and there were a number of ice cream sticks, and they had different emotions written on them. And the children would go through the jar and find the stick that best described the way they were feeling at the time. And then they circled up, and the children held up the stick. So everyone was well aware of how they were feeling. And the teacher said to me that I gave them a quick glimpse into where people were at, checking in, and then those children that needed some time and connection with her, she was able to get other kids on task so she could give them the time they needed. And I thought, this is really cool. We don't do anything like this. I thought about the children in our community, and I thought, okay, maybe the ice cream sticks is not going to work with our kids, but I do like the idea. I visited a school where there'd been a school shooting maybe 6 to 8 months previously. So in that particular school, the students circled up on the football field. Like, I'm talking hundreds of students in a big circle. And what they did to begin the day was they yelled whatever emotions, negative emotions they were feeling into the middle of a circle. And again, I'm like, this is crazy. I've never seen anything like this. And then I thought, okay, are my children in my school that primarily come from heavy gang influences and backgrounds, are they going to hold hands in a circle and yell words in? Probably not. So it got me thinking about what could I do in my setting that could replicate some of these crazy ideas that were crazy to me at the time that I'd never thought of or seen. So I went there to look at digital tech and came back with this appreciation of social and emotional learning. I came across, and I mean this when I say it, I came across the concept of empathy. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. And once I started unpacking it, I realized I don't believe that we see a lot of empathy in our school community. Then I had to truly reflect, I don't even know what it means myself. Am I showing empathy towards other people? So I kind of took that stuff back, and that was kind of the beginnings of it. And so the first thing we did was we reflected on the fact that we've got children showing up at 9 a.m. in the morning, because that's when we start school here.
Right.
And a bell rings. So obviously get into your learning. And that is so ignorant and so arrogant of us as educators to believe that children are just ready to learn because a bell rings and because we say so. So I thought, what can we do? So I spoke to my wife and I said to her, I've got this idea. I think we might start doing yoga and breath work at school. And she said to me, you've never done them in your life. I said, I know, but I do think it might be something we could do.
Where did this come from, though? Where did the idea? I mean, if you've not done that or had that experience,
I think just the awareness, I guess, that yoga is coming. It's something I've seen on TV or on YouTube.
So just kind of instinctual from what you knew that, like, hey, maybe this would be a good way to start the day. Okay.
Yeah, something I'd never done and had any experience of. So
after your wife gave you kind of the crazy look, what happened after that?
Well, she said to me, because she does yoga and she does breath work. And so she connected me with a yoga instructor over here that she's been to. Yeah. And we organized a meeting. So I went to see her at a yoga studio, and she said to me, take a seat. I'm in there, there's no seats. It's literally a mat.
Hmm.
So the seat was the mat. So I sat on the mat and she sat on the mat with legs crossed and stuff. And we sat and we spoke for about an hour just about what we were trying to achieve, which essentially was to find a way to help calm and center and regulate. I didn't have the word regulate at the time though,
Yeah, sure.
our students, so they could better be in a space to connect with learning.
Mm-hmm.
So we did, and we had a staff only day at the beginning of the next school year where I introduced yoga. It was a surprise. Like I told no one we were doing this. I just said to our staff that we need to show up at 6 a.m. in the morning in the pitch black to the space. And we did, and there was this music playing in the background, and as the sun came up, we all did yoga together. So it was a very holistic spiritual experience that no one knew was coming. And everyone felt something that day. It was such a cool experience. So we then continued to engage with the yoga instructor. She would come in and do professional development with staff. Then we started to introduce it to our kids. And then it became the way we would start every single school day. But prior to that, we actually got rid of the bell. So I visited a school in Australia in Sydney, and I'd heard a principal speak, and he talked about removing the school bell from his school. And I asked him why, and he said, the only places aside from school that you still hear bells are factories and prisons. And he said, why would we want to condition our children to those places? So that really connected with me, that statement. So I went back, grabbed a pair of cutters, and I cut the wires at a cost of $2,500 to our school eventually. I wasn't very popular. I found out later all I needed to do was turn off the button. But I was so passionate. I just want to get rid of this damn bell. So yeah, children come in at 9 o'clock. They move into either their learning space, or if it's a nice day, they'll do it outside on the grass. And they will do yoga and breath work for about 7 to 10 minutes. We will end with we call it a kata care here, which is like, it's like a prayer. It's a way to center and bring us together spiritually. And then we go into learning. So the first 10 to 12, 15 minutes of a day is spent with something relational that connects us and grounds us and brings us together. Something to center us. And just before we start learning, the teacher reads out the register or the roll. And I never considered the importance of that. As a teacher, I would rush through the roll, or I would look at the empty desk and know Johnny wasn't there, job done. What I learned through this approach was that I was ignorant to the fact that it may be the first time that day that an adult looked at a child and smiled and said their name. So we really prioritized spending time on that initial connection of a day. So yeah, the first 10 to 15 minutes in a day. And the benefits were kids largely were better placed to start learning, but also because we were doing movement, a lot of kids were using their energy and the energy was being expelled from their body. So they were able to be better connected to learning rather than feeling dysregulated in their body. So we didn't have the words for that at the time.
Right. Well, that's what I was just getting ready to say. Is it sounds like I mean, there's a couple of things I just want to note about your journey, and we'll continue on. But one is when you began telling me about your experience with school and the positive experience, I was actually a little surprised because, and then of course you got to the experience that didn't surprise me as much. And the reason I say that is that it feels like many of the people that I've had the opportunity to meet in this space that are truly doing things to change systems in a very positive way, many of them, if you go back, had experiences that were not ideal, that didn't feel connected, I mean, various things. I mean, I can go back to my own experience and think about, I went to a school that had corporal punishment and was subjected to corporal, I can think about all of these things. And very often I find that the people that have really gone in and really disrupted systems that weren't working had that experience. So it was interesting to me to kind of hear your journey and your experience. And, I mean, in a way, I kind of feel like anytime I hear a story like this, like, oh gosh, I'm really sorry that you had the experience that you had. But, that experience that you had also has informed the work that you're doing that I think is so meaningful. What else is interesting to me about this is I've found just in my own journey that there were things that began to become intuitive to me along the journey that I now have language for and now have words to describe that I didn't know why, but I just knew intuitively or through experience that these were things that were working. When I learned with my son that when he became dysregulated, rather than moving closer and hovering over him to take steps back and to use a calming voice and to, the things that I learned, like, they made a difference. And it sounds like, you, through not only experiences you had, but through this sense of kind of almost this intuitive sense, began to realize some of these things. And I know the journey you've been on, and we're going to dive into that. But it's really interesting to me that those things that you began doing early on weren't necessarily tied to all of the research. They were tied to that intuition, but how well they map to the research, how well that maps to, understanding the importance of, regulation before learning, right? You can't expect the brain to be in a state where it's able to learn if you're not in a state that you're able to connect and regulate. So I think that's really interesting. I want to pause here. There were a couple of people that just joined in and said hello. Chantel, our lead Canadian volunteer from British Columbia, Canada. Somebody here joining us from Florida. Glad to have you here. And Chantel, kind of as you were telling your story, said, I didn't go to college, ended up running one. And our one of our friends from New Zealand, I think probably a common friend here on as well. And so great to have people. And again, if you're watching live, always say hi. It's always good to see who you are and where you're joining us from. And I know there's a number of folks on live now, so let us know who you are in the chat. So let's continue on with their journey. But I just wanted to comment on that because I think that part of the journey where it's like, something just begins to fall into place. And I love that. I love that, again, you could take all of the terminology, and you could take the, neurosequential model, and, you could map it to these things that you were doing, but that's not where it started. So that's really interesting. So I'll let you continue on with the journey.
Yeah. Thank you for seeing me, because that's exactly what it was. It was intuitive. Everything was kind of intuitive. We were just trying things, throwing things at the wall and seeing what stuck. And lots of different things. We started bringing in, we called them brain body breaks. Some people would call them brain gym, these somatosensory based activities and exercises to, again, reconnect with the body to then regulate the brain. And we didn't have the words for that either. We just tried some things, and all these things were starting to work. It wasn't until I traveled to the US to a conference called Learning in the Brain. They host them around different places, but I went to one in San Francisco. And I heard Dr. Bruce Perry speak. Now, I was probably one of the only people in the audience that had never heard of him at the time. And he got up there on stage and he spoke, and it felt like a rock concert. It really did. Like, people were so excited to hear him speak. And so I'm sitting there curious, like, why are people so excited to hear this guy? And then he started speaking, and he started telling these stories of children, and it really connected and resonated with me. He was talking about children from our school. He wasn't, but it really felt like these are our kids.
Right.
These are the communities I've worked in. These are parents I've worked alongside. These are people I know. These are my friends and my own family. And even in the stories he told, this was my story. I just wasn't self-aware at the time. So I really connected with it. And what happened was, I was just so fortunate that conference, I heard Bruce, I heard Dan Siegel, Mona Delahook, just all the greatest people in this space. I got to hear all of them in such a short space of time, and honestly, it was a bit overwhelming. So what I did was I walked out of one of the workshops, and just for a bit of space, because it was overwhelming for me. And there was a bookseller, and they were selling books, and I saw the book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. So I picked it up, and I went and sat in the lobby of that hotel that day. And I'm not kidding when I say this. I sat there and read that book from cover to cover without moving, without getting something to drink or eat or go to the bathroom. I just sat there and read it. I was so in the stories. And what happened was, I got back to New Zealand, and I shared with my leadership team the book. And I said, I highly recommend you read this. I've heard this guy speak, and everything he's saying is really what we're doing. But he's using these words, these big scientific concepts and words to describe it. So we became very curious, very interested in this approach. So essentially, our entire staff read the book. I'm talking leadership team, teachers aides, administration staff, school caretaker. Everybody read the book, and everybody connected to it on some level. And it finally gave us the words to describe what we were doing intuitively. And it actually made a massive difference, because other schools in our area and region thought we were crazy. The things we were doing were a waste of time. Why are you doing yoga and breathwork with kids? You're supposed to be doing math and reading and writing. It's not going to help with the poor academic achievement at school and your attendance, but it really did. So we stopped being the crazy school, and people started to take us seriously because we were able to use these words, but then say, this is what we're doing and this is why. This is regulating the nervous system.
Can you share a little bit more on that? Because I think it's really important, because, you know, the reaction that you got is a reaction I think that many get, that, well, this is where we should be prioritizing. And there's no education without regulation. There's no getting to a learning brain if we don't have a brain that feels safe and seen and heard and supported, right? But so often people look at that, well, I don't have time for that. And the opposite is true, right? You don't have time not to do these things that are so critical for setting the foundation to really be able to support another human being. But talk to me a little bit about, you know, because sometimes this work takes a little bit of salesmanship, meaning that people need to understand the benefit. And can you talk a little bit about how, as you began to do these things, and I'm making assumptions here, but I think it's safe to make that you saw improved outcomes for kids, that maybe you saw improvements in academics, but maybe you even saw decreases in, you know, disciplinary referrals or other things that might have been positive. What were some of the positive indicators that you began to see? I mean, you know, other than some of the stories that I'm sure that you can share as well, but what were some of those positive indicators that you began to see as you began to really bring this work into the school that you were working with?
Just the calm culture that ensued from it. So we turned off the school bell, and because what we were noticing when we actually started looking at it was the bell rings, and in a primary or elementary school, the kids just run. A bell rings, everybody runs. So once we removed the bell, kids would walk pretty calmly, and they'd get back to class, and they'd be in a better position. If you're a child and you run back to class and 9 o'clock hits and you have to sit down and do some writing or some math, your heart rate is pumping so hard, it's not going to work. So kids were coming in a lot calmer. Kids were moving around the school a lot calmer. We didn't have too many kind of what we call behavioral incidents anyway, right. Because for our children, school was very much a safe place. Right. I think without us even doing too much, because a lot of the homes our children came from, they were chaotic, they were violent. So school was safe by default because it was better than where we were. But when we really started to focus on making it more relational, and when I say more relational, actually unpacking how we are in the space, then we started to see the benefits. So yeah, academic achievement outcomes started to go through the roof because we actually realized that we are both the problem and the solution as adults. And that was tough. That was tough to look in the mirror and actually truly be reflective of our role in dysregulation. Right. That when children are showing up at their worst, we're meeting them at our worst. So we had to really reflect on that and why is that happening? And we had the science, the neuroscience to shed some light on it. So it went beyond the intuitiveness and like, this is the why and this is where it comes from. So we started unpacking our own stories of intergenerational trauma as well. Our attendance improved as well. So we are a school that at our best had 92% attendance. Like the New Zealand average attendance sits around 50%. And it's getting worse by the day. We were at 92%. And the school hovers, it's not quite that good anymore. Like COVID really did a number on everybody. Things really changed. So we started to see these massive improvements in everything. Like what we weren't aware of is the massive health benefits, because we don't have any data on that kind of stuff, but the Ministry of Health had data. And the data they had was families in our school made appointments with their GP and they showed up consistently. Other schools in the region, the data wasn't showing that. We saw a massive decrease in skin conditions for our children. Like we didn't do anything specifically to achieve that. It was just noticed in the time period before we were doing this approach to the time period during and after, there was just this massive improvement in skin conditions. We noticed that there were less teeth extractions from the dental clinic. All these things happened, all these health-related benefits from us just focusing on well-being. Like we didn't get kids brushing their teeth at school. We weren't getting kids to apply lotion for skin conditions. It was just focusing on this holistic well-being
Yeah.
had this massive impact. And it
Yeah.
wasn't our
Yeah.
data, it was from the government. So it
Yeah.
was amazing
Interesting.
data.
Well, and again, I mean, if you look at the effect that stress and stressors have on our health, there's a strong connection there. And when you're creating a
Yeah.
safer, more supportive environment, I mean, to some degree, it shouldn't be a surprise. But that's interesting. I've not heard that kind of data correlated with this before. But that's really
Neither.
interesting.
It,
Yeah.
it was groundbreaking, seriously.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about, change is hard. You
Mhm.
bring in new ideas, and sometimes people are resistant. When you began, and it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like from the start, you had, again, that kind of intuitive approach that I think was already kind of heading in a slightly different direction, creating a safer place. But then you brought in like yoga, and you began doing some other things. How did the staff respond, and did you get any resistance, and what happened with that over time, if there was resistance?
There was a little bit of passive resistance.
Mm,
I think what really, really helped was I didn't just introduce yoga, I did it with staff.
right.
I remember one time going into a classroom and because a teacher said to me, are you doing yoga over there in the office?
Mm,
I had to say that actually, really, I'm not. He said, well, you're making us do it, but you're not doing it over there. So that made me think. So what I said, and I was a little bit reactive with this, I said to her, well, I'll turn up in your class every day for the next week and I'll do yoga with your kids. You know what? I'll take the kids for yoga. And the kids thought it was really, really cool. These are 10, 11-year-old children. They thought it was
yeah.
a real buzz to see their principal doing yoga with them and breath work. And so you have to lead by example.
Mhm,
And so I was leading by example.
mm,
People were also seeing the changes in me as a person.
mm,
And I'll qualify that by saying that I was so unaware of how I was and how I was perceived by other people. But going through this and learning relational neuroscience and learning all these concepts, it made me much more aware of how I was as a person.
mm,
So people were seeing a change in me.
mm,
And then they were seeing a change in the children and a change in themselves. So I think it really helped people come on board. Like our staff meetings stopped being about academic subjects and academic achievement and started to be about, here is a relational neuroscience based concept that I've learned through NME or through Dan Siegel or Mona Delahook or Larry Desautel. And from this concept, I really think this is important for us to know, because this sounds like Johnny in room 5, or this sounds like Susie in room 2.
mm,
And then Johnny or Susie's teacher would chime in and they'll start talking about what they're noticing about Johnny or Susie and the differences and changes being made. Or maybe they were really stuck with where things are. We're doing this yoga and breath work, but Johnny is the kid that when everyone else's head is down in a position, Johnny's scanning the room.
mm,
So what's
mhm,
going on
mhm.
with Johnny? So then we started talking about hypervigilance
Right.
and where that might come from. And then someone says, okay, Johnny lives 3 houses down from me. This is an adult saying this at school. And we're noticing the police is turning up at their house twice a week.
Mm,
And
mm.
dad is being handcuffed and taken away, yelling and
Wow.
screaming at mum. So we're like, oh, okay, maybe this is where. So we started having these really, really in-depth conversations about our children, about the culture of our environment, the culture of the outside school environment. And it really helped to build that empathy and compassion
Mm.
For our children. So the way we talked about our children changed.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I don't think we
That's
had a
so
deficit.
important, though. I mean, the way
Yes.
we think is important. The way we talk is important, and the influence that it has. I mean, the way we
Yeah.
think about something influences the words that we use. The words that we use then affect the way that the kids would see themselves. And
Yes.
yeah, that's so critical. I love that.
And if you think about deficit thinking, right? Well,
Right.
you go into any school, so we don't do that here,
Right.
but we do. We're humans, and this stuff does happen. But what we noticed was whatever deficit thinking that was kind of lingering in the background started to dissipate and disappear over time, because
Mm.
we started to see the stories behind the behavior that was all encompassing us before. It was this behavior that kids
Mm.
are doing this. It's the end of the world.
Mm, mhm,
We started
mhm.
to see the stories, right? So, but then not only did we start to share the children's stories, I would start to say, hey, when I was at school, and I'd never
Mhm.
told those stories to anyone I'd worked alongside. So I showed this level of vulnerability that happened very authentically and organically. And then someone else would start to share something about their story.
Mm,
So it was almost like therapy
mm,
in lots of
mhm.
ways without it being therapy. We just
Yeah.
started to share stories.
Right.
And then I had this epiphany one day. And in New Zealand, what we do is we have evenings for community. And we get parents to come in where we talk to them about changes in curriculum, maybe in English or math. Um, when we talk about, we call it a sexuality education curriculum over here. You need to get consultation from community about what you can and can't say, and letting them know what you're going to talk about. And we'd have those evenings. Very few people turn up to them. So I thought, okay, let me have an evening where I talk about our trauma-informed approach, because I'm so excited about it. Well, hardly anyone came.
Right.
And just the usual parents that would always turn up for everything, they came. But I gave a little bit of a spiel that night, and I talked about intergenerational trauma and how things are transmitted and passed on over generations. And at the end of that session, a dad came and saw me, a big man, 6'5", both ways, huge man, gigantic. And he said to me, that intergenerational trauma thing that you're talking about, that's me. I said, okay. And he said, I never wanted to be like my dad, but I've realized after listening to you tonight that I'm very much parenting in a similar way that I was parented, and I'm really hurt and upset about it and angry. What do I do now? And I didn't have a good enough answer for him that night. And I did say to him, I'll get back to you. And I went home and complained to my wife. And I'm like, it's not my responsibility to be therapy for all these parents. And she said, who's the person that lifted the lid off this trauma stuff? I said, me. She goes, well, you are now responsible to help people. So I thought, oh, man, you are so right. I didn't say that at the time. But what I did was I reflected on it. And what I decided to do was hold a space. So once a month, we would invite dads to come in, dads or men in our community to come in. And let's just talk about being partners and talk about being dads. And it was the first time ever I really showed any kind of true vulnerability in my community. I have a very tough and staunch gang community. So looking like I do, a big brown man, is really, really helpful in that community. In other communities like ours, the principal may not look like me, and people will stand over them and influence. Well, no one could do that to me. So it really helped. What I didn't know at the time was it was a real double-edged sword for me, that whilst it helped in that way, there were children that would look at me and I may in some way resemble the abuser. So I had to really, and it wasn't until I started learning this relational neuroscience stuff till I understood that. So invited men in, and the vulnerability I showed was I had a photo of me playing with my grandson, who would have been 2 or 3 at the time. And I put that on our school Facebook, and I said, this is an opportunity for men to show up in our community and talk about what it means to be a dad, what it means to be a good man, and all these things. And I said, because you know what? There is no real parenting manual. And the feedback I got was that people had never seen that side of me. So people showed up. And we had 34 men that showed up. Now, in our community, men don't show up to anything like this. We had 34 men that showed up. So we started doing that once a month. I initially started teaching. I thought, here's an opportunity to educate people. So I would have a slideshow prepared, and people would sit there in rows and look at it, and then we'd talk a little bit. And then it evolved to becoming a circle. So really much as a therapeutic intervention, really. And I started to get rid of the slideshow and just talk. And then we'd eat afterwards. We'd sit down and have something to eat afterwards. What I realized was the best conversations actually happened over the food. So we actually got rid of the circle in the school hall, and we just sat around the food and we ate and we talked together. And then we started holding that same space for the women in our community. And then we started to really see the impacts of what we were doing with community in the community. So it wasn't just us changing learning pathways for children and teaching them about regulation. We were actually changing an entire community, one person at a time.
This is so important. And one of the things that I tend to mention periodically is this idea that, you know, if we take some of these ideas, we take the neuroscience, we take the trauma-informed, approaches. You know, this is not just about having a 4-hour professional development opportunity for staff to learn what these things mean, and then suddenly they're trauma informed and they're creating a better school. You know, when it comes to bringing these things into a school, it is deeper than just doing these things to support the children. It is systemic change at the school that is supporting the staff in a way that is aligned with the neuroscience, that is aligned with trauma-informed approaches. But then it's got to reach out to the families and the community, and that's where that real change happens. And I love that
Yeah.
story because that very much embodies that thing that I say a lot. It's like it's not just about doing something different with kids. It's really like, because how many times have you seen someone that's gotten training in trauma informed approaches, and they're beginning to reflect on it, and then you hear them talk about the parents. Well, these parents are horrible, and they're doing this and this and this. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
where's that trauma informed lens? Because
Yeah.
very often a child that's coming in with a lot of trauma is coming from a household where there is intergenerational trauma, and we need to apply that same empathy to the caregivers, the family, and really think about how these things have been sometimes kind of persistent in intergenerational trauma. So I love that you kind of embody that. I want to just share a couple of things here real quickly. We had a couple more people say hello. Another one joining us from New Zealand, so that's great to see. And Chantel, love your quote here. We are both the problem and the solution. So maybe a T-shirt idea there. But I want to kind of go back in your story. So we've had this journey. You saw Perry, you picked up the book, you read the book from cover to cover, you came back, you began to talk about these things you were implementing. You began with kind of the yoga and the breathing, but the journey continued. And at some point, I know you're a certified trainer in the neurosequential model. Wonder if you might talk a little bit about that from a couple of different perspectives. I'd love you to, I've got some good familiarity myself with the neurosequential model, and big fan of Dr. Perry's work, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about that work and the, kind of how that began to get integrated, because you began taking a lot of different pieces and pulling them together. So share a little bit more about your journey, and as you began to, go beyond kind of the book and some of the initial things you were starting to really kind of get this deeper knowledge of, the neuro-relational piece of this and the trauma-informed piece.
Yeah, I think again, it comes back to, it gave us the words. We didn't have the words. It was all intuition. So coming across concepts like regulate, relate, reason, the 6 R's.
I expect you to do this when you do that. It's like,
Oh yeah, underneath the laptop, I'm absolutely doing
that's
it.
Right. That's
it's
right.
almost mandatory to do that with our hands, right? It just happens.
That's right. That's right. It's like a Bruce Perry greeting. It's like, hello.
I've got this image in my head of him doing it right now. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It did. It gave us those words, and it gave us these concepts. Like we were doing the 6 R's as a school. They were part of what we did. But now we're like, oh, okay, we're a bit more intentional about it. And we can see the importance of it. One in particular, that learning is rhythmic and repetitive. That was really important to us. And it made us reflect on the way we taught different concepts. That because in a lot of ways, I think in New Zealand, at least anyway, it's probably quite universal, but children hit about 7 or 8 years of age, and we start getting rid of the clapping and the chanting and the songs and the dance and the movement in class, because someone's given us the subliminal message that it's time to do the real learning. But we know human beings learn through rhythm.
There's a whole lot of real learning that happens in play, and
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, well, here's the rationale and the justification and the evidence from a highly reputable source to keep doing that stuff. So in lots of ways, it gave people license to follow their intuition and do what they know is right. So we would embed these approaches in school, and then through learning from Bruce, I became exposed to lots of other people in the space. Dan Siegel's approach with the flip lid, Mona Delahooke. And for me, Mona Delahooke came to me at a time where this relational neuroscience was making sense. But then I found the compassionate approach and the way she spoke. And she just has these, we would call them in New Zealand, nan vibes. Like a nana. Yeah. She has those vibes. It just, come and sit on my knee and I'll read you a story type vibes.
And she is genuinely one of the nicest human beings you will ever meet. Mona and I have been connected for a number of years, and she's always been very supportive of the work we've done. And I mean, genuinely just such an amazing human being. But you're right. I mean, taking, Porges's work and the polyvagal theory and making it approachable and understandable, but also the whole effect of, looking at this through a lens of understanding and supporting individual differences. And her work was just so compassionate and yeah.
And that's really what it was for us. It's just taking these different concepts from different people And it all started to make sense. Like all the pieces of the puzzle started to come together. And then I guess over time, we stopped talking more about these experts and their concepts. And it's just like, this is what we do here. This is part of who we are. This is our way of being.
Mm.
And I guess that's when the work I do now, like I educate educators, and I let them know there is no framework for this. There's not a matrix to assess against. This is a way of being.
Yeah.
And that's really hard when you've got educators that have been indoctrinated in a system that is all about judgment and frameworks.
Right.
So
well, and looking
polarizing.
for tools and strategies, right? And
Yeah.
One of the quotes that I've always loved, Susan Hopkins, who's with the Merit Center, Self-Reg, Dr. Shanker's work, kind of has this saying like, you are the strategy, right? I mean, it's not about a toolbox with strategies and tools. It's about you. And when you begin to embody this work, that's so important. And you and I think share kind of a similar journey in a way that, having explored a lot of the work from, the people that you mentioned, Dan Siegel, Stuart Shanker, Ross Green, Gloria Salzman, like, there's pieces of all of these things that just kind of come together. And it's not just about one single approach or framework or solution. I think it's really bringing these things together. We have our own little, what I call the 5 principles, at the Alliance. We talk about kind of our 5 principles, which are, trauma-informed, neuroscience aligned, neurodiversity affirming, relationship driven, and collaborative. To me, it's more principles than just here are these steps you are going to take. That's not what it's all about. Yeah. Love it.
I 100% agree with you. It's when people ask me, when people will say to me, what do you think of this person and their approach and their framework? And I will always say to them, there is no thing that's going to give you everything you need.
Yep. No one size fits all solution here.
There's really full stop. There's no right period. Right.
Yep.
So my thing is, it's like, take what connects with you from this person, take what you like from this person. And if it fits your context and it works, then go with that. But there is no one size fits all. There is no one framework or one person. For me, I mean, I could list off probably 30 different people's stuff that we use and I continue to use. What connects with me the best now is Laurie Desautels. And I think what connects with me with Laurie is that this is someone that has actually done this in a classroom. There's high level
and continues to do it in
there.
classrooms.
Yes.
Laurie has continued working in classrooms, supporting schools.
Yeah.
Laurie and I have had a good opportunity to work together over many years. And, in fact, she's been our most frequent podcast guest. That's and by a pretty good stretch. We've had Laurie on quite a bit, but one of the things.
Laurie's coming here in March of next year. I'm bringing her over to New Zealand.
Oh, that's fantastic! Fantastic.
Yeah, it's that credibility, right? Like, and this is not a put down of anybody, but you can be a professor or a doctor or a scientist, and you can know some things.
Yeah,
but I want to hear from someone who's done it.
Yeah,
that has that credibility in the space.
I interviewed people. So at one point, Laurie and I did a podcast where we were talking to people in a school that she had been supporting and working with, including administrators, educators, and students. And it was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed that. But I remember one of the educators going, Laura's not somebody sitting in an ivory tower somewhere, just kind of like coming up with these theories. She's there doing it. One of the things about Laurie's work that resonates with me the most is about this work starting with the adults. This is first and foremost about the adult nervous system, and we can't do or put a layer over supporting kids if we don't begin with the work with ourselves. And that's really resonated with me over the years in collaborating with Laurie, is that, this begins with an adult understanding. And of course, you and I, grew up in the 80s, right? And probably, had similar background. We did not learn about our brain and our nervous system and our behavior through that lens. We learned that we made lots of bad choices and had consequences and, but, there's an opportunity. And I love when, with Laurie's work that, the application in the classroom, when you begin to teach children about their brain and their nervous system, because I think it's really empowering as a kid to begin to understand, because a lot of kids look at their behavior and they look at, I'm a screw up. I'm always doing things wrong. And when kids begin to kind of understand their own stress response system and where behavior comes from, it makes all the difference in the world. And it's great to hear you have Lori coming out. Yeah, fantastic. So keep me move. Oops, you didn't freeze there on me? Okay.
Okay. So yeah. So I think as well, it's if I think about the work I'm doing now, it can be really polarizing with educators when you say the adult goes first, that
Right.
it is about the adult's nervous system, because they'll look across and say, yeah, but the kid's behavior, the kid's behavior is a mirror reflection of your nervous system at that time, and you not showing up and holding space. So it can be really, really polarizing. Like one of the things I like to do is talk about some of the strategies that we've employed and done to kids over time, and talk about through science and through compassion and equity, how these things are damaging to children. And the word I like to use with educators is abusive, because I know it really hits somewhere in them, and it gets them at least leaning in or leaning back saying he's wrong. So it gets them invested in some way. But I guess one of the most used strategies in New Zealand schools is timeout as a strategy. And I think back about timeouts, and I think about being a young parent with a 3-year-old daughter who was tantruming, and we didn't have the skills or knowledge to understand she's doing exactly what she's supposed to do as a 3-year-old. So at the time, we followed the advice of Joe Frost, the super nanny, who was on TV. And the advice was naughty chair or naughty mat or naughty step. So we tried the naughty mat with our daughter. And I tell you what, it works. Timeout works. What we didn't know at the time was at what cost does it work?
Right.
And that's what I like to share with educators, right? So our daughter learned that when I'm going through these big emotions and feelings, my adults won't show up for me. My daughter also learned that I can't show these emotions and feelings, so I'll just bury them, and I'll repress and suppress them and push them down. We are incredibly fortunate, my wife and I, that we came across this work. And over time, we have done all those repairs to the ruptures. And we have a daughter that when she's going through hard things, she comes and talks to us, because it very well could have been the complete opposite because of these strategies we use. And these are the strategies that we use PB4L over here, PBIS over in the States, that these are the strategies that work. And yeah, they all work. But at what cost do they work? And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and they don't always. I mean, I'm not a big fan of compliance behaviors and many of that. And yes, some of these things can work in the short term, but often, one of the things that I find is often these well-intentioned, kind of positive approaches aren't working. In fact, what we often see is, this well-intentioned, it's the reward, it's the, point and level system, whatever it may be, it's actually the thing that's leading a kid to become dysregulated, to have a big behavior, to end up getting, restrained or secluded or having some kind of punitive discipline. So, I would argue that, these approaches, for the kids that might seem like they help, they probably don't need them. And for the kids that need help, these things are not effective at all and can, in fact, backfire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. And that's what I was meaning. Like it works, but it works because it either stops the behavior or withdraws the child. And these are all very abusive strategies to children. Right. So they work, but at what cost do they work? And then that's the work that you're doing, that I'm doing, to explore and share. This is the actual cost. So what can we do instead? And that's when the mirror goes on us as the adults, that we go first, that we do the work. And when we do the work, we're in a much better place to show up as a calm, consistent, predictable, regulated adult. And through co-regulation, we can hold space for that child who's dysregulated.
Yeah.
And that is so new and foreign to educators that have never heard this stuff.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions. And before I ask those questions, I want to let folks know that are in the chat, that are watching live. Feel free, if you have a question or comment, feel free to put it in chat. I see one there already, and I'll try to get to that in a moment. These conversations go by quickly, and I'm already thinking about 10 more questions I want to ask you. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is that we talked previously about some of the outcomes that you were seeing in terms of children, some of the positive benefits. And of course, they were actually much further, reaching than I would have imagined. That's really interesting data that you have. I want to ask you too about positive outcomes that you saw for the educators, because one of the things that we've seen before, and I'm curious with your experience what you saw, but and I'm a big believer that the same things that we can do to improve the outcomes for kids can improve the outcomes for the teachers, for the administrators, for the paraprofessionals, whoever they may be. But what kind of benefits did you see? Or, we've seen cases where we've had lower staff turnover or increased staff satisfaction when people put into place things like this. What kind of benefits did you see as you began to put these things in place within the school that you were working as a principal?
So yeah, low staff turnover, like you said, was definitely something that we saw when we were advertising jobs. People were curious, wanted to come and work for us. That wasn't in the cards much earlier on in my time there as principal. We were the school in the hood, in the ghetto. No one wanted to come to us. So that was definitely a massive change. I think for me, I think of in particular one teacher, and this happened to a lot. So when we had these evenings for community where we essentially were holding these therapeutic interventions, our staff came as well. Not all staff, but our male staff all showed up to the men's ones, and our female staff, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4, would consistently show up to these. So you would sit in a space where perhaps a teacher would share a very vulnerable story about their life and perhaps their own childhood, and perhaps sitting in that same room as a parent of a child that's in their class. And the next day, that parent makes a conscious decision to send their child to that class, to that teacher who's just shared the most horrible and horrific of things that happened to them. So it was an absolutely very sacred, safe space to be in. So what I actually saw was that the adults that came to these once a month meetings, there was a personal change in them. And that's what I talk a lot with educators now. Is often when I speak, after I finish speaking, people are like, I thought I was coming here for professional development, but it was kind of therapy. And in lots of ways, this is about me and my personal life. And I have this massive smile when I hear it, because to me, I really don't care about people's professional life when I do my presentations and I speak. It's the person I'm connecting with. So when I hear that, that's the greatest feedback I could ever get, to be honest. So we saw these, and it's hard to, like, there's no data or evidence I can say to support this, but you just saw these massive changes in how people were as people, relationships improving at home. I had one teacher that talked to me about how some of the stuff we'd done had really helped her in her marriage with her partner. Their partner had been suicidal at one stage in their life, and just being in these spaces and hearing this relational neuroscience and connecting it to their own trauma may have been the difference. She believes it was the difference in him taking his life and not taking his life that day. So those kind of stories are the ones that mean more to me than the other things. But my thing is that if this is going to help you in your personal life, it absolutely is going to have a massive impact on your professional life. You get to be able to show up authentically as your true self. So the personal growth is what I saw most. And for me, like I was, what do we call it? I was just doing and not being for so much of my life. And through this approach, I know who I am. I know how I am now. It's, I have a wife that loves me unconditionally. I have children that love me unconditionally, and grandchildren. I don't know if I could have said that back then before we knew all this stuff, because I didn't know who I was. I was very disconnected from self. So knowing this on a personal level has absolutely changed my life from all of these people I've learned from.
Yeah. Well, you said the word if this affects you on a personal, and I don't think it's an if. I think that if you begin to really wrap your head around this, I think it's inevitable that it will affect. I mean, I don't want to go out too far on a limb here, but I think that when you begin to learn this, it can make you a better parent. It can make you a better educator. It can make you a better human being. I firmly believe that. I believe the world needs more of this just throughout the world. It really can, I think, have such a deep impact on kind of who we are and what we do. And I think one of the other things that's important about this is it is a journey. And the one thing, as people are beginning to, learn about the effect of trauma or neuroscience or, all of these things, is it's important to also give yourself grace through the process. Because it's easy to reflect back and think, oh gosh, well, look how horrible I was doing. I mean, I wish I knew the things then that I know now. I think about being a parent, my first child, and there were things that, like you, kind of intuitively along the way that began to make sense to me, that and began to lead the way. And then as I got into this work, suddenly it was like, oh, a light bulb went off, and and I wish I knew those things, but I know what I know now. And and no matter where you are on this journey, you have more to learn and more to know and more to,
Mhm.
more to, kind of begin to practice and embody. But I think it's important that people do reflect on that and do give themselves grace and do understand their own nervous system and stress response system. And this is never about perfection, right? I mean, I'm going to bet here, because you embody a little bit of co-regulation here. Talking to you is good for my heart.
Mm.
So we might need to talk more often, but
Thank you.
you know, even though you have this knowledge and you've done these things, you have your moments where you flip your Dan Siegel lid, right?
Mhm.
and we all do, and it's just a matter of continuing on and continuing. We often use that quote from Maya Angelou, kind of the do best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. That's what this journey's about. This journey is about continuing to be curious, continuing to do the research, continuing to put things into practice and make a difference.
Absolutely. And that's the Maya Angelou quote is one I use at the very beginning of my presentations,
You and
because
me both.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's the lens I want people to
Yeah.
experience the conversation through we're about to have, but also to reflect upon when there's something I say
Right.
that will conflict with their values and belief systems, because I'm sure I know I do. And I want them to stay curious and to reflect later, at least when they're in a safe space and place. Why did I feel the way about what they said about this thing, and where does that come from? And we want people to do that kind of work, right? Because cognitive dissonance is so strong. So you don't want people sitting in the middle of a presentation on ChatGPT trying to figure out, like, is this guy telling me the truth or not? Let me try and find ways to disprove what they're saying. So that Maya Angelou quote is, and I try and live my life through it. And like I said about flipping the lid still gets flipped. It gets flipped less, and when it does flip, it stays flipped for a less amount of time as well. And that's the change. That's the shift that we want.
That's right. Yeah, no, I love that and deeply agree. So we're beginning to reach the end of our time here. I do see a question here from Sydney, so let me get to this. And coming from Canada, how do you manage to close the educators to these concepts and the associated frustration and even fatigue when encountering pushback or rigid systems? Great question. So how do you navigate that?
Yes. So if I could use the advice of Michael McKnight. So I had Michael McKnight on my podcast, and he said to me, sometimes, Jase, you just need to close the door. And I said to him, what does that even mean? And he said, well, sometimes you close the door in your classroom, or maybe in your administrative office, and you inside those four walls, you just do what you know is right. What is best for the children in there or the people you work with. He said, somewhere along the line, though, someone has to spend time ticking and checking boxes and doing the paperwork. He says, but it gives you an opportunity to just do what you know is right. I was incredibly fortunate that we get used to, I think we still get assessed like this, but around every 3 years, the system comes and checks up on us in schools over here and come with their clipboards and start assessing different things. And we had a very, very good visit from them, appraisal. It should have been better, but that's not how the system works over here. As a school in a very low socioeconomic area, they can't publicly say how well we're doing, because then that puts a massive spotlight on schools in higher socioeconomic areas in our community that aren't doing as well. And I realized that at the time. So we had a very good review, but it should have been outstanding based on their criteria. So that gave us 3 years to close the door and try and do some things that were innovative. And another thing I did was, and this came from trauma. I didn't know that at the time, but my first year as a principal, I went to a principal's meeting here in the city that I live. And I didn't know the term neuroception at the time, but I realized later when I reflect on it that no one looked like me in the space. I didn't feel welcome. I didn't feel safe. When I spoke that day, people were judging. That's my perception anyway. So I went away from there and I never went back. So I never attended for the rest of my career, I never attended another principal's meeting in the city that I live. And that meant then I was siloed, and I don't recommend that for anybody. Like, the answer is community. It's not being by yourself, isolated. But it did allow us just to focus on our school. And I think for us in the time, that made a big difference. How did I deal with staff members that maybe were a little bit not on board at the time? By walking the talk. Like, I can't expect the educators to do these things if I'm not doing them. Like I said, when I called out about the yoga, are you doing yoga in your office to begin the day? I'm like, no, I'm really not. So then I did it. And then I remember I took a classroom of children. We lost a teacher for a little while and we couldn't find the right replacement. So I said, I'll put my hand up. I'll walk the talk. I'll teach this class. So I did for half a day up until lunchtime. Every day I taught this class. And I remember the first day I went in there and we did the yoga and breath work, and then I did the karakia, the prayer with them. And the kids looked at me like really strange, like, what are you doing? How come you know how to do this? We didn't expect you to do it. So I think walking the talk is really important, because when you walk the talk, it's really hard to criticize or judge, because often people will say, well, you're not doing it, so we don't have to. But when you're doing it, there's less of an argument to be had, right? So I think, now, in all honesty, we never got everybody on board. There were one or two staff members that were kind of almost there, not quite, and that's okay too. I've never seen a school where actually schools are working where everyone is on board. Right. And that's okay too. But as long as most people are kind of pedaling in the right direction, I think we can do some really good things together.
And sometimes some people will leave, right? I mean, some people will move on, and that may be for the best.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah. So a couple more comments here, and again, another viewer here from Australia, which is always great to see. And we've had Nicole joining us from New Jersey, who said missed most of it, but want to go back and listen. And we always encourage you, when we do these live, they are available after the fact on all the platforms as well. So you can go back to Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube and watch it. We also make an audio only version available so people can listen as a podcast as well. So good opportunity. So we have about reached the end of our time here, and I think we could probably keep going for a while. But I want to ask you, kind of as we wrap up here, what's on your plate right now? What are the things that you're working on? What are you excited about? What's going on with you? Like, we worked through a whole lot of your work that you've done in the past, but what's really getting you fired up right now, other than having Lori out there, next year, and you got to find a reason for me to come out there. I got to get out to New Zealand. I might not come back here though if I go, so that's the only problem. So what's going on with you? What's exciting?
Yeah, so the majority of work I do is with educators in schools. That's what pays the bills for me. My heart is really in community and holding space for men and women in our community, and working with families. Like, ideally, if someone could pay me the money I'm earning working with educators, I would work with couples on parenting and relationships. I've got a lot of experience and some terrible experience in those spaces as well that I feel people could benefit from. So I think that's important. I am doing some work in prisons, running the Fritzy Horseman's Trauma Talks, Compassion Prison Project program in there. We have a Ministry of Social Development here, so it's a government entity, and I'm working with men in different communities, men that are survivors of abuse, men that have, in lots of cases, caused harm and abuse, men that are former gang members or even current gang members that are wanting to change or are changing, and are wanting to do better in their communities. So I'm working alongside Ministry of Social Development as a national champion in that. Trying to blend and fuse this relational neuroscience and trauma-informed approach into relatable lived experience stories. And you know what? Let me say this, that in all the work I've done in this space over the years, I spent 1 week, and in that week I worked with youth here. So these are students from the ages of 13 to 18. And I held some space for them. And the next day I was in a prison. And the emotional intelligence of the youth that day and the men in that prison far surpassed any school staff room I'd ever sat in. And that was so it was surprising in one way, but it wasn't in another way. So I have a lot of heart in our youth coming through, that they are the real change makers in the space, because their emotional intelligence, these are the people that are out there protesting for rainbow rights, for inclusion, against the massacre over in Gaza. They're saying the things that a lot of us weren't able to say at that stage of our life, because we were very much conditioned as people to sit on our hands, not talk back, not ask questions.
Right.
But these kids are like, why?
Yeah.
And when they say why, we get really triggered by that because what do you mean why? Just do as you're told.
Yeah.
No, we wish we had the freedom and space and voice that they have. So we find that hard. So I have a lot of heart in that. So that's mainly what I'm doing. I've written a book. Hopefully that comes out end of March next year.
Okay, I was going to ask why I haven't seen it yet, and you got to get me a copy when it comes out, or send me a link. And we'll have to. When the book comes out, we'll have you on, and we'll talk. You won't have to wait another year. When a book comes out, we do a special episode. We'll have you on, and we'll talk about it, and get people excited about it. Yeah.
And with the book, I'm kind of thinking like I wanted to. Initially, the thought was let's share a whole bunch of trauma-informed practice and relational neuroscience with people, but make it really relatable and wrap it around a couple of small stories. But when I started writing it, it ended up being stories with some neuroscience sprinkled in. So it's interesting how it kind of evolved. But there's a chapter where I compare the school and education system to the prison system. So it's quite a polarizing read, and I've got a chapter called
there's too much similarity in many of these systems, and this is why we end up seeing kids moving down that school to prison pipeline. And there's such a large population of children. I think we are failing that are kind of moving in this direction. Where can people follow your work? There are places where they can connect and follow your work.
So the main space I sit in, it will be on Instagram. JaseWilliams.nz. You'd find me there. On YouTube, I've got a TEDx talk called Trauma Makes the Invisible Visible. Those are probably the main spaces I kind of hang out. I've got a podcast called Unconditional. It's only currently available on Spotify until I figure out how to. I always thought I was really good at technology, and I realized that I always had children help me with that stuff at school. And once I left the school system to go do this job, I'm like, where have the kids gone? I don't know how to plug in things. I don't know how to do bloody anything. So that's the basis.
You know how to cut wires, though. I heard that. I heard you know how to cut some wires.
Yeah, at a cost of $2,500. Yes.
All right. So we have reached the end of our time. Any final words you want to leave us with as we're wrapping up here?
Oh. Yeah. So last week I spoke at an event around suicide awareness. And the advice I gave was that we tell the men in particular, because it's more men that are taking their lives, that we tell people to reach out and speak up, that it's okay to not be okay, which is amazing messaging, because it's not the messaging a lot of us got in our childhoods about what it means to be a man. We were told to harden up and get over it, and not show emotions and feelings. So the messaging to speak out, reach out, it's okay to not be okay is great messaging. But when men reach out, they're met with judgment, silence, ridicule, told to harden up. So if we're going to tell men to reach out and speak up and talk about their emotions and feelings, we need to show up and we need to be there with unconditional love. So thank you.
Unconditional is such an important principle here. I mean, of love and support for children and adults alike. It's really sad, but I mean, I know men that are my age who have committed suicide of not having the support and the connection and feeling that they couldn't. So really important things to leave us with. And I really enjoyed the conversation as always with you. I want to thank you for joining us here for this conversation today. Encourage you, if you've been watching today and join us. I see a couple comments here already. Love this. Thank you. Some great comments here. Please share these. We do these live, and the intent is to spread ideas we're spreading and to share things that are going to make a difference. Please, share these with your friends, your colleagues, others, and this work can really make a difference. And again, the world needs you, Jase, and I appreciate all the things that you're doing to make it a better world. And with that, we will wrap up. I'm going to ask you to stick around for a second. We're going to say goodbye to everybody else. And thank you again for joining us. And please look for us again in 2 weeks. We got another program coming at you. And thank you. Thank you for being part of the community here. We will see you again next time. All right. Bye-bye.